artist friends, today I'm sharing another tutorial using a couple of my new stencils with StencilGirl. I started off by gessoing this journal page, and then I grabbed a bunch of bits and pieces of papers that were over to my left from other journal pages. Lots of times if I don't use these scraps while they're on my desk, they end up over in like a scrap bucket and it kind of gets piled up. So I thought instead of throwing them into that bucket today, I would just use them all over on top of this journal page. I'm just going to spread them out so that the types of handwriting and the book pages, the dictionary pages there, the numbers, letters, the different types of script are just kind of spread evenly throughout these two pages. I'm using matte medium on the front and the back, and I'm securing them to the pages. Can be sometimes a long and tedious process, so I did cut a little bit of it out of the video to kind of speed it up for you. I'm going into this journal page with an idea in mind, and I'm gonna share with you that it completely went in a different direction than planned, but I am so glad that it did. In fact, I was going to use a completely different stencil on this page as well, but as I started working, as I got these layers of papers down, as I get the gesso down next and start thinking about the pages, I kind of felt like I wanted to go in a much different direction than I had planned in my head. I think that's kind of one of the fun things about art, is that sometimes we start off with this grand idea in mind and we don't always know how we're going to get there, and then sometimes those directions completely change and we get something totally different in the end, but then we have another idea to explore that we originally had that we never explored. Anyway, it's so much fun to art journal and just explore these stencils and different techniques, and I have so many ideas in my head. I think that's the problem here, because once I started working on this journal page, and my head had one idea, but as I started working, the page kind of led me to a different idea. So I'm really looking forward to exploring the many ways to use my new stencil designs, and watch for a lot of videos. There's already several, they'll all be linked below, but there are more coming because my head is full of ideas. I just put some gesso down over on that book page to the right, and added some water to it. And I'm just using my fingers as my tool here to kind of spread some of this gesso out in between the papers. I want to push a lot of it back so they become background material and kind of unite them with the gesso, because they're kind of like look really patchworked, and so the gesso is helping unite those pages to make it look cohesive, so it doesn't look like I just like confetti through a bunch of pieces of paper on this journal page. It's making them look a little bit more intentional, and I'm creating my background layer here. Now I'm using a paintbrush with just a little bit more water into that gesso to get another like tone value of that gesso, so it's even a little bit more watery. And then I thought it would be fun to tip it just a little bit to get a little movement in that gesso. It adds just some more interest in the background layer to do that. I'm going to finish this up, allow the gesso to dry completely before adding my stencil next. Then I picked up my new triangle leaves stencil. Again, I mentioned just a little bit ago, this was not at all the direction I was planning for this journal page, but I just had this feeling that I had to explore. And so I picked up the stencil. I'm tracing it all very, very loosely with my stabilo. The stems don't completely reach down to the bottom of my journal page, so I'm just going to kind of flip or mirror that stencil down to continue those stems. I could have done this by freehand, and I do as I continue this process freehand some, but the stencil allows me to get those stems so much straighter. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I sometimes struggle with getting those stems straight, so the stencil is a perfect tool to help me with that. Now I'm just activating that stabilo. The stabilo is a water soluble medium, and so using some water and my paintbrush activates it, allows it to kind of grunge up, look a little watercolory, and this watered down activated stabilo is going to act as my shadow and shading in these triangle leaves as I add some paint to them. So I added more of those triangle leaves to the right side with that same process. I love a good odd number of whatever I'm doing on the page, so I quick counted them there and decided to add one more triangle leaf over there to the right. And I'm activating those with water in the same way that I activated those triangles on the left page. Any place that I need just a little bit more dark color, or I missed tracing it, because I was tracing so loosely in that stencil, because I want the stencil to help me draw, but also to not completely constrict me like a stencil kind of can. So drawing really loosely in those triangle shapes gave those a little even more life to them in a way. And so I'm using the paintbrush to activate, but I'm adding a little stabilo places where it needs a little bit more, or that I kind of missed the tracing process. Next, I'm going to pick up my triangle leaf reflection stencil to add a second layer of these triangle leaves to my journal page. If you haven't seen my stencil intro video, that'll be linked below, but I'll give you a little Cliff Notes version, so to speak. I had no intention of designing the stencil. It wasn't even planned, but when I was working on the triangle leaf stencil, the stems were kind of wavy. And I thought, wow, these stems kind of look like they might be reflecting in water, which I thought was kind of cool. And then that gave me the idea to kind of make them smaller, add a second bunch, and then reflect them onto the stencil. And it turned out way cooler than I planned. This might be my favorite stencil of the bunch, but I'm not playing favorites, but it's my favorite because of the surprise. I had no clue how much I would really like the stencil. The lines in the center kind of line up to create a really cool moment. The triangles create a cool moment, and it is so much fun to pick apart the different little elements in the stencil to create so many different unique designs on a journal page or in your artwork. So I back to the art. I traced those triangles reflections the same process, and I'm also going to activate them again with the same process. I chose not to draw stabilo in all of those triangle leaves, just like where they fell on the page in good spots. So maybe some of them didn't fall in the best spot, and I decided not to trace that one. And then I kind of looked back and I added some more. So it's kind of just like an intuitive process here, adding that second layer of the triangle leaves to the page. Now that stabilo is mostly dry, there's still a few areas that are wet, which I maybe should have allowed it to dry a little bit more, but I was too excited to get some color on this page. So I grabbed the golden so flat paint in that Titan green pale and also that turquoise color, and I'm going to begin to layer those two colors into my leaves. I'm adding that paint to my palette over there, which is an old book page, added some water to it, and I love how this kind of acts like watercolor on my pages. It looks like watercolor, it kind of moves a little bit like watercolor, but it's permanent. This is one of my favorite little techniques. I love watering down paint, allowing it to get really loose and mingle on my pages. And so my first layer is that Titan green pale. I have my hair dryer on in the process to kind of speed this along a little bit, allow it to dry. Once I get a small layer of that Titan green pale, I'm also going to now top that off with the turquoise color. It is also watered down just like that Titan green pale to kind of allow those two colors to mingle a little bit on my page. This is kind of going to be a back and forth process. It's kind of a layering process here. I'm going to allow the first layer to dry a little bit, watch how it mingles, watch how it darkens and lightens as they mingle, and then I'm going to add some more paint in places that I think need to be just darkened up a little bit. The best advice I can give you for a process like this is to start light and work in layers, because once you get it too dark, it's really hard to take away that darkness. But starting light and getting darker gives you that dimension, that cool watercolor look, allows the two colors to kind of mingle and layer together, and it just creates a really neat effect and outcome in the end. This is such a fun, quick, and simple page to create. My last step, besides adding some words on the end, is going to be to add just a little bit of walnut ink. I could have stopped right here. I didn't need the walnut ink, but that background is feeling really one note. It's really flat. It's got the background color of those book pages, which kind of vary in color a little bit, and then that white gesso, and it just feels kind of cold and flat. But as I begin to add just a little touch of this walnut ink in places, it really warms up that background, gives it another layer of interest, and really allows those leaves to pop and it all to kind of come together. Again, with this walnut ink, I started off really light, put it in a few places, and as I liked it and as I liked what it was doing to the page, I continued to add more of it. While I'm working on this walnut ink process, I'm just going to remind you that all of the supplies for this journal page will be linked below, along with all of the other videos that showcase my new stencils with StencilGirl. Thank you so much to StencilGirl for partnering with me and allowing me to design these stencils. It's truly been so much fun, and I look forward to hopefully some more in the future. Now that I have that walnut ink down and it's pretty much dry, I'm going to grab my Stabilo graphite here. It's just like that black we used earlier, but it's a graphite in color, and it doesn't react with water as easily, I think I would say, as the black. It does react with water, but the black is really intense and the graphite is really light, but I love the sketchy lines that it gives. So I'm just adding some really fun sketchy lines around each of those triangles and then really loosely on the stems. My final step when I'm done with this is to add just a little phrase on the bottom of my page. I picked out a few of the, I forget what they're called, they'll be linked below. The phrases from Tim Holtz. They're a thicker cardboard, but they're kind of too thick for my journal page, so I actually peeled them apart, so I just have that top there, and then I'm going to stick it down with matte medium. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are just as excited about these stencil designs as I am. Links to the stencils will be below. Make sure you grab both of these triangle leaf stencils because they are so much fun to layer together. Thanks again so much for watching. Oh, I almost forgot one last thing. If you grab these stencils from StencilGirl and post your creations on Instagram, be sure to tag me because I would love and actually cannot wait to see how you create with them.